Welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast which asks which movies are well worth watching and remembering for all time. Every episode we discuss a different piece of film history to decide if it should make its way into our movie vault. Filled with questions, trivia and crazy challenges, it's the perfect way to deep dive into a myriad of movies. But don't just take my word for it. Here's a glimpse of what to expect in today's episode.
I was like, who's Sean Benham?
Benet.
Oh wow, it's nice to see that David can have a spectacular mess up like I would usually have.
It's quite funny because you started saying I'm only going to mention the main players, but then you proceeded talking about every other person as well, but you still forgot Sean Bean.
Okay, we'll make up a character for Sean Benham at the end of the episode.
This is a great start. Mate, are you okay?
Maybe it's like, the Tempest. It was like, I have to be, of all the takes I've ever heard on Show Kills, like, just be the weirdest.
Sometimes a dream, sometimes a nightmare.
Is Sylvester Stallone real?
Young, shady grandpa John.
I feel cheated right now.
Julia Roberts.
It's all about Eve. It's not though.
Sorry, we'll cut that bit. We will cut that. We will cut that bit.
Oh my god.
Well, good movies.
Hello and welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast that asks which movies are well worth watching and which deserve to be remembered for all time. And it's our 100th episode. Woo! Thank you. I am your host, David Osger, and I am joined by my co-host, who, after appearing with me on 100 episodes, has had a lot of intros. So may I introduce... lover of the Wilhelm scream, the ever-constant element of this podcast, our very own Riddler, who has been in spooky circumstances, musical circumstances, has been at Christmas, he's been in Star Trek situations, he's been in Star Wars, he's my friend and co-host, he's my trusty aide, he's Hades, not Cupid, he's invisible but not unheard, he's my animated sidekick, he's a film secret agent. He has spent his time in a Vietnamese prison, a hazard suit in number 10, the Brazilian rainforest, and give me a piece of paper for our anniversary. He's been in Coruscant. He's been the guru of all things good and bad. He's been Lord of the Sith when Shelley put him through Adam Sandler films. And he's been judge, jury, and executioner. He has been out of hiding after lockdown. He represented Wales in Eurovision. He was the Beast, Hank McCoy. He's Mr. Snooty. He's my very own Watson. He's a geezer, partner in crime, the narrator of our stories. He broke the law. And he is our precious. It's Craig McDonald. Round of applause, everyone.
Go Craig.
See, they won't even applaud. They won't even applaud after all of that.
How are you feeling, Craig?
Well, not great after you bombarded me with all those memories.
Should be happy memories.
You brought up Mr. Snooty right at the damn end.
That was only because it was kind of... But yeah, 100 episodes. So how crazy is it we got to this stage? Definitely going through those intros. It did bring back a lot of memories of just the sheer diversity we've had of, starting the podcast, being in the recording studio, then having lockdown, having a stage of the podcast, which was called Well Good Movies Lockdown, where we're doing it weekly, coming back out of the pandemic, and then, coming to our formula we have now, which we sort of lead into each episode with a new movie.
Yeah, it is amazing we've gone through all that. I don't know why on earth I ever let you convince me that weekly episodes were a good idea.
Hey, it was a lockdown, so we needed something to keep ourselves occupied. Anything stand out to yourself, Craig, in terms of moments or memorable sort of favorite moments?
I mean, I'm always gonna sort of cling on to Endgame moments, and specifically the way in which usually people's hopes are dashed, and the way I have to just hold on to those moments. Yeah, there've been some good moments there, especially watching some people struggle with the concept of what some of our Endgame specials are. I think some of my favorites are Dan Cullinane thinking that a famous Christmas film was the film Lonely. It's obviously my personal favorite of the big reaction to Turkey Time Gobble Gobble.
Yes, yeah.
And then there's just a load of other moments, including coining our very own sort of in-show term, Fredding the Shark.
Yeah, very true. And just the fact that by doing 100 episodes, then that would also mean that we'd have 100 Endgames plus more from the bonus episodes, etc. So, yeah, definitely crazy to think there's been that many. And they've all been uniquely chaotic in their own ways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm sure we've got plenty of more memories, but also discussions to go through today, as we have got a very special trilogy of films that we'll be discussing, which came about in a unique way as well. So let's get to who we'll be talking with today for this special episode. So it was very fitting that after 100 episodes, we go back to who was joining us on that very first Well Good Movies episode, talking all about Spielberg movies. So please welcome once again, Laura Leishan. Hello, Laura.
Hello. And
Hello.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that it was Spielberg, because I've been racking my brain as soon as you said I was on the first episode. What was it?
It was
what
that
were
memorable.
we talking about? Yeah. Oh, clearly. I think I was just so incredibly nervous. I just don't even think about that ever again, because I was just panic the entire time I was doing it.
Well, again, you were, Craig would remember in terms of, I think you would have been the first official, Well Good Movies Endgame winner from that episode as well. So
And to be fair, that entire game was all about David Hasselhoff. I don't blame you for forgetting that the episode itself was about Spielberg.
Yeah. So there was a lot of variety in that, and we talked about different Spielberg films. So yeah, it wasn't just one specific film. Indiana Jones, AI, Jaws, all sorts of things were brought up. So there's a lot to remember, but yeah, crazy to think that, what is that? Yeah, 2019. So in terms of years and stuff like that, and the fact we've had a pandemic in the middle of that, it's been quite a time.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that long ago. My gosh.
And what about yourself, Laura? Obviously, you've joined us a few other times since then as well, talking about all different films. Sometimes a Christmas sort of theme, or like a sort of dark, spooky theme. What's a standout for yourself?
To be honest, I think that the most standout thing in general is just being on the podcast itself and being able to talk to other people that I wouldn't ever in a million years come across in my day-to-day life, and just having conversations with other people about film and stuff, which is really cool, because I know a lot of the guests you've had on have had I'm just someone who likes to watch film, but you've had people who've been in the industry on the podcast. It's always kind of cool to see their perspectives on different things and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's just that variety of people we've had. Like I said, you do gaming and streaming and stuff like that. We've had film journalists on, we've had people who actors, etc. We've had people who involved in making films, so there's been a big variety. So yeah, you are right in terms of like the people we've got to speak to and so have fun with has been really a highlight as well. So yeah, thank you for joining us for this one, Laura. So we can't wait to find out your thoughts about today's films as well. But we're not alone in this episode. We are joined by many members of the Well Good Movies crew as well to celebrate this landmark episode. So joining us over in VHS Corner this week, first up is Di Hill. Hello, Di.
Hello.
How are you?
Hello.
I'm very well. I'm excited to be in a corner.
It sounds like Baby or something. We put you in the corner.
No, it's the quite opposite of Baby. Baby, like nobody puts Baby in the corner.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Just a naughty
you just
child
put
then,
Die
basically.
in the corner.
So yeah, how are you finding it in VHS Corner? Is it lots of books there as well as VHSs, or?
The whole reason I'm here, it's books, it's facts, it's my favorite things in the world, basically. But this time's VHS Corner, everyone already knows all of the facts about the Lord of the Rings, so it's book facts, which is what I like. I basically ignored the movie completely, and I'm only going to talk about the books.
Fair enough. Yeah, Craig didn't take kindly to your homework request of people reading through the books. I'm sorry to say.
Read all of them now.
Fittingly as well, Di, you said about the love of the books. So we've got somebody else who's helping you in terms of their knowledge as well. And has also been in VHS Corner. It's Shelley Taylor. Hello, Shelley.
Hello. All right.
Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Good. I'm very excited to be talking about Lord of the Rings today.
And I'm sure we'll get on to some memories, etc., films that you've been talking about in the past. Craig did mention Turkey Time there. I'm sure that is one that springs to mind for yourself.
Yeah, Turkey Time. That was my first episode from over 4 years ago now, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have
first
been
Valentine's
February
special.
2020.
So that's the fun thing as well, is that everyone here is like, Di was then the second episode, you were like a few episodes afterwards on the Valentine's one. Chris was on with Di in the second episode as well. So yeah, everyone here has been loyal supporters. So thank you very much. But yeah, we can't wait to find out some more facts and history from yourself, Shelley. So helping us over in the Movie Vault this week to discuss legacy are three people who have often joined us in the Movie Vault. First up is Stefanos Florakis. Hello, Stefanos.
Hi there. Where's my money? Like, not gonna lie,
You keep
when I
asking
joined
this,
this
and I keep saying
every time. Like, should I remind everyone that me and Di, we did win, and we're still waiting that one night out in the cinema.
I mean, Di's had his prize. I don't know what your issue is.
The problem you have is you're subscribed to every cinema subscription going. So
Di, but we have an offer.
Watching Star Trek, it was amazing.
Yeah.
Craig was really angry.
When he wasn't asleep.
I thought we did everything together. I mean, we have a whole law firm together. What is this? Wow. I'm sorry, but we need to break up now. Like,
I mean, it's going to be even worse for you in today's Endgame, where you are just going to be head-to-head.
And it'll be interesting when we have another Endgame special coming up. I wonder if anybody else will have like the long name run-in theme, where you guys had, Florakis and Hill, mobster attorneys at law.
Although my personal favorite is the witness relocation program.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, well done on those many times you had to wind us up by saying those names.
Yeah, well, apparently I will have to go solo this time because no one invited me for the thingy. But anyway, I'm good. Now I'm single and I'm thriving, and I'm ready to talk about little people going around in the Middle Earth, just doing things and playing with rings.
Fair, yeah.
Well, yeah, it's nice to see we're keeping up the pretense about what we are going to be talking about in today's episode. Good work, everyone.
I think it's hard to hide, really. But yeah, thank you, Stefanos. And also joining us, as we mentioned, is Christopher Maxwell. Hello, Chris.
Hello. It's good to be here. Hey, guys.
How does it feel after, joining us first on the Halloween episode, in which Di also gave us a fantastic intro in that one. It's introducing us to the spookiness of that episode. And then you later did a Halloween intro as well, using your acting ability. And most recently have amazed us with your Stallone impressions and your stories of Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, yeah. It's been some good times on the podcast, and there's some real fun stuff. I was just thinking about some of the films we've done. Obviously, we talked about The Invisible Man. I really enjoyed that. But I was trying to remember it, I cannot remember the name. What was that crap dog film we did?
I was going to say, you're the one person who was on the 50th anniversary episode, 50th episode. I'll let Craig introduce this one.
Yeah, Pudsey the Dog, the movie.
Oh, that was it. Oh, God. That feels like it was actually a nightmare. I question whether or not that was real. Because, watching it was it felt like a film that was generated by AI. It was genuinely horrendous.
Well, I'm glad that you've been able to forget about that film, because it lives on in my nightmares.
Well, it's weird. I forgot the name of it, but it's still up there. I still get these weird sort of flashes of it. It's almost like a form of PTSD, Pudsey traumatic stress disorder.
and that's not going to appear in any highlight reels today. Don't worry, there's no memorable lines from Pudsey. We're good. But yeah, thank you for joining us, Chris. I'm sure we'll be talking more memories as we go along, and as we teased, the trilogy we're discussing today. And last but not least, it is Liv Mackinder. Hello, Liv.
Hello. I realise waving probably doesn't help in a podcast. I think I'd have learned that by now.
Exactly. It's I don't know, I can't remember how many times. It's 5th, 6th times a charm.
Yeah, one day I'll get it. I will. I do think it's very amusing to me, though. Normally, I'm the most clueless person on every podcast episode, and finally, I get a topic that I'm not clueless on, and everyone else just seems to be an expert. So thank you for that, for still making me the clueless one.
It is funny how it's just hey, everyone want to sign up to the 100th episode. That's the big thing about it, but we don't know what film it is. And then I guess because it's one of the biggest franchises of all time, then everyone's like, oh yeah, I fully know this. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was another Pudsey the Dog the movie, there might be a lot more angry faces in this Zoom call right now. But it's not. Sorry, Chris.
For sure.
Let's get on now to today's set of films, which came about in a very interesting way. So if you've been keeping an eye on our social medias, we have put out the call asking for everyone's help in terms of choosing what film we had for this 100th episode. We've already mentioned our 50th episode, so that one, it was chosen via an Endgame special. So again, carrying on the theme of the film being chosen by people involved in the podcast. So this, we thought, would be fitting for the listeners and all of the guests who've been on before to send us submissions, send us suggestions of what they think should be suggested. We had a huge influx of suggestions, so it meant that we had to put them all into a hat and draw them in terms of whittling them down, and that then went to a poll, and today's films was chosen from that poll once sent out to everybody. Craig, any standouts from the suggestions as I give you a bit of a sneak peek at them earlier?
I find it a bit concerning that multiple people submitted Dragon Ball Evolution. I don't know whether that was meant to be in honor of or spitting in the face of the recent news of Akira Toriyama's death. But thank you, whoever did that. I will say, who was deranged enough to suggest Food Fight, I applaud you, and also I am concerned about you. But then, yeah, when it came to a lot of the other choices, they are either things that already sort of on the radar, and I have some respect for, or things I just don't really think about too often. So even though the film that I eventually voted for didn't get chosen, yeah, I think what we've ended up with, I think will lead to the right result. I mean, the most expected result, I imagine, by the end of this episode.
And it kind of goes back, it's a good way of looking at our legacy, because we had episodes in the past which kind of looked at like franchises as a whole or genres as a whole. So this kind of goes back to that as well. The poll, which we mentioned as well, just to clarify, that included Death Wish 4, Food Fight, as Craig mentioned, Dirty Dancing, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Because there was many recommendations of Lord of the Rings, and after consulting, everyone was happy to talk about the trilogy. So that is what we'll be discussing today. And as people have mentioned, luckily we've got a lot of experts, a lot of people who love these movies. And even if you didn't love these movies, everyone grew up with them.
I do think allowing 3 films to win the poll it's cheating a bit, though, isn't it?
Slightly. But people, even in this call, have arguments for why it's one film. But again, I'm not going down that wormhole.
Oh yeah, I don't care. I just think it's cheating.
You say people argue that it's one film. There are people who argue that it's 6 books. So
I love how the other debater is there, like, I'll challenge Craig. I will bring this up. Everyone else is like, no. Again, when I was going through the old episodes, I just remember Shelley's introduction in the Adam Sandler Part 2 episode. I was like, you okay, Shelley? And you were like, I'm scared, because Craig was so angry. It's like that level.
They made me watch Jack and Jill on my own. How do you expect me to react?
You brought it on yourself.
What, by knowing you?
Right, so yeah, that is how we came to talk about today's films, which, yes, is Lord of the Rings trilogy from 2001 to 2003, which includes Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and Return of the King. So for those who don't know, where have you been? Plot summary for Lord of the Rings: a young hobbit named Frodo?
That's the first thing that's ever gone wrong.
A young hobbit named Frodo Baggins, after inheriting a mysterious ring from his uncle Bilbo, must leave his home in order to keep it from falling into the hands of its evil creator. Along the way, a fellowship is formed to protect the ring bearer and make sure that the ring arrives at its final destination, Mount Doom, the only place where it can be destroyed. So, this was directed by Peter Jackson, also known for King Kong and Heavenly Creatures. The film was written by Peter Jackson, along with Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, which are also known for working on a lot of Jackson's films. And there's also a writing credit for Stephen Sinclair. And of course, this is based on the writing of J.R.R. Tolkien. It's produced by Jackson, Walsh, and Barry M. Osborne and Rick Porras. The music is by Howard Shaw. Cinematography by Andrew Leslie. Production design by Grant Major. Editing by John Gilbert, Peter Scarratt, Michael Horton, and James Selkirk. And special shout out to Richard Taylor and Tanya Rogers, founders of Weta Workshop, which would have played a massive role in terms of all the props and everything for this film. So, the cast. I'm just going to list the big names of this, and I'm not going to tell you the characters. I hope you would know who they are. But this is probably one of the most stacked casts, even if we were just talking about one film, possibly we've ever had. So, Elijah Wood, Ian McKellen, Viggo Mortensen, Sean Astin, Sean Benham, Billy Boyd, Dominic Monaghan, Ian Holm, Christopher Lee, the GOAT, Liv Tyler, John Rhys-Davies, Orlando Bloom, Hugo Weaving, Kate Blanchett, Martin Sukoas, Craig Parker, Andy Serkis, Miranda Otto, David Wenham, Brad Dourif, Carl Urban, Bernard Hill, and John Noble. I'm also going to shout out some favourite roles in this film, which have become synonymous and very well known within pop culture. So we have Sarah McLeod as Rosie Cotton, Alan Howard as the voice of the Ring, Phil Grieve as Orc Commander, Salah Baker as the Man-Flesh Uruk, Paul Norell as the King of the Dead, Lawrence McCure as Lurtz, the Witch King, and Gothmog, i.e. the guy who says, "Stay where you are." Jed Brofrey, which is the orc that says, "When are we going to get some meats?" Stephen as Grishnak, which is the one who then follows up and says, "What about their legs? They don't need those." And we also got Bruce Allures as Aldor, e.g. the most important role in the Two Towers, the man who mistakenly shoots an arrow in the Battle of Helm's Deep. Just wanted to shout him out. I was just like, if there's someone missing, tell me.
I think there is somebody missing.
Oh, sorry, his name got turned into somebody else's. Sean Astin, Sean Bean, which I might have said as Sean Benham.
Idiot.
It's a really fancy way of saying bean, guys. I don't know if you know.
I was like, who's Sean Benham?
Benet.
Oh, wow. It's nice to see
is
that
a
David
prime
can have a
example.
spectacular mess up like I would usually
It's
have.
the fact that I put in, well, it's either like bean got changed or it's just when I was putting in so many names, it just like combined with another name. But because you had people like Martin Sokos, which plays like Galadriel's husband, I can't remember his name, I was like, oh, maybe Sean Benham is one of these random people. But yeah, Sean Bean. I'm sorry, Sean Bean. One does not simply get Sean Bean's name wrong.
It's quite funny because you started saying, I'm only going to mention the main players, but then you proceeded talking about every other person as well, but you still forgot Sean Bean.
I did forget Sean Bean. I just mispronounced his name.
No. You did say Sean Bean, so
okay, we'll make up a character for Sean Benham at the end of the episode, right? So anyway, there's the cast. There's some of the memorable characters. So let's talk all about Lord of the Rings trilogy and ask the question of whether these films deserve the honor of a place in our movie vault. Our vault encapsulates memorable movies for all time. Now, I'm not going to go through the history of the years these films were out, but I think it is notable some of the films that came out around this time, because it is quite a time for blockbusters. In 2001 alone, you had Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Monsters Inc., Shrek, Ocean's 11, The Mummy Returns, Jurassic Park 3, and then following this, in the other years that Lord of the Rings came out, you had Spider-Man, Die Another Day, Men in Black 2, Star Wars Attack of the Clones, The Matrix Reloaded, Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, Terminator 3, The Matrix Revolutions, X2, and Bad Boys 2. All of these came out between 2001 and 2003. So it's a crazy time for blockbusters, science fiction, fantasy, and action films, and just franchises in general. And lastly, in terms of the film's legacy, I just wanted to mention some of the memes of Lord of the Rings, and those include One Does Not Simply, Taking the Hobbits to Isengard, Potatoes, Man-Flesh, Share the Load, You Have No Power Here, You Have My Sword, And So It Begins, Salted Pork, Destroy It, Gondor Calls for Aid, Why Shouldn't I, Where Was Gondor, Denethor Eating Tomatoes, and My Friends, You Bow to No One. There's a lot more. I didn't even mention all of them, but I thought those were the standouts to me. Yeah, I was thinking definitely about a lot of us during those memes. Like the So It Begins one, I think is just Craig, either at the beginning of every year of the podcast or just this episode maybe.
I mean, I most associate it with Christmas and all of the retail.
Yeah. It's a great film for memes, definitely. So, yeah, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, as we alluded to there's a lot of memories, connections, experiences connected to this film. Where do I begin? Laura, you are a special guest and our first guest way back when. So what is your memories and experiences of watching Lord of the Rings?
Well, I went to see them when they first came out in cinema. So I was 10 when Fellowship came out, and my dad took me to all three. So they hold a special place in my heart because of that, because it was a nice bonding time between me and my dad still really loves the films. It was his 60th birthday last year, And the present he asked for from me was DVD versions of the extended cuts of all 3 films. It was so difficult to find that because he wanted the physical copies. I had to go on eBay in the end to get them because it was insane to get them. But yeah, it's just they're films I've grown up with, and they're films that I've watched. I've probably watched them all. I think I've probably watched Fellowship more than the other 2, but I think I've watched all 3 at least 5 or 6 times, if not more. But I remember going to see the Fellowship in the cinema, and it was the first film I ever saw that was like 3 hours long. And I remember being in the cinema and being like, okay, they're in Rivendell and they're, getting the Fellowship together, and, they were like, yeah, we'll all go and do this. And I was like, right, great. That's the end of the film. Because it was like an hour and a half in. I was like, yeah, that's it. And then it carried on. And I was like, okay, 20 minutes, another 20 minutes. And then it just kept going. I was like, what is that? Like, why is it not I was loving it, but it's just like, this is a really long film, and it just blew my mind.
Well, that is also like another meme in a way of Lord of the Rings, is the Return of the King being like the multiple endings, like people often bring that up. But yeah, that is true. I think now, some people are more willing to have their long blockbusters, but Lord of the Rings kind of paved the way for that. And the fact that some people can go and watch a marathon of it, which understandably, I think you need to have breaks. And I think even some people would have watched The Hobbit along with these as well. So maybe, oh my God, how many hours is that? So the fact that you're looking at like 9-12 hours with just these films alone, regardless of whether it's the extended editions, the cinema experience is definitely a thing with these films when people are talking about it. Shelley, you also mentioned before recording that you've already seen these films this year, so I'm assuming you get quite a few watches in quite often.
Yeah, I tend to watch them like New Year's Eve as well, as they're coming in, but I then also have watched them. I watched them last month, just off the cuff.
Do you do that whole like time New Year's, like to the like when they come over the mountain and all that, in Tom's team?
So they bowed to no one. The hobbits bowed to no one at midnight.
Right, okay.
Except I mistimed it, so actually Aragorn and Arwen kissed at midnight, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Still a nice moment for it to happen. At least it wasn't some just like random moment.
Yeah.
Liv, I think you said that these are also a comfort watch for yourself.
Yeah. So first time I watched Lord of the Rings, I just secured the DVDs off of my grandparents, and the first one, The Fellowship, was a pirated copy of the theatrical release. The second one was a collector's edition extended, obviously, of the Two Towers. And then the third one was a pirated copy of Return of the King. So for years, I would get really confused because I completely forgot that I was inconsistent with the copies. But for years, I would get confused as to why there were extra bits in the first and last film, or why there were missing bits in the second film. And it took me concerningly long to realize the middle one was extended when I first watched. But either way, every single sick day I've had since, I have watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And when I first watched them as well, I was so obsessed from the first 20 minutes that I was young enough that I had to bargain with my mother to be able to watch another half an hour every night, so that I didn't just not sleep. So, yeah.
I think even though obviously at the end of each episode we'll say where can people watch the films, and we say like physical media, etc. Support that, and we've been talking about DVDs, etc. So that is a big thing. But I think you do bring up a good point about pirate copies, because I think that the bigger the film is, there's more likely that there's going to be pirate copies. And these films do stand out to me for remembering, like, going to friends' houses. And I remember somebody had a copy of Lord of the Rings, which was like from another country, and it was like really bad subtitles on it, which obviously it was like a video or something, so you couldn't get rid of it. And it was like at the beginning when it's like telling the story of what happened before, and when he says like, throw it into the fire, Isildur. It's like he said, throw it into the fire, Legolas. And it was like the subtitles had got like characters' names wrong and all that kind of stuff. It was almost like the original version of that, like, Google translates with songs. So that always stood out to me. And also I remember a copy of Fellowship in which it was like, literally people getting up in the cinema and walking past the camera and stuff like that, in which it had been recorded in the cinema. And you were like, and that's not the type of film you want to watch on like a dodgy camcorder in a like cinema in which, you got people standing up and down every 5 minutes. So that's definitely a thing which I remember about these films.
Most blockbusters I watched until I was 18 probably had someone standing up in front of the camera and moving away, which again is concerning.
There's probably films that it worked better for, but I just remember this was a particularly bad copy of it, kind of thing. Like there's probably not a good camcorder that they had used. But like again, cinema experiences and stuff like that, it's all relevant. Chris, you said you had a kind of interesting connection to this franchise.
Yeah, so I watched the first one when it came out. It actually came out the day after my 11th birthday in the UK. And I went to go see it in the old cinema in Barry.
You didn't have a birthday party in which you disappeared, did you?
Oh,
my 11th birthday.
That would have been grand, actually. We actually went as a family to go watch it, and I remember we actually had an interval, and that was the first time I'd ever gone to the cinema. And it's like, wait, the film's stopping for a bit. What? This is madness. This is so cool. And then you come back and you watch the second half, and I remember like really loving it at the time, because I just turned 11 and was really loving it. I then watched Two Towers a year later. But I never saw Return of the King in the cinema. The problem was as well, like as the years went on, I just never committed to watching the extended cuts. I tried to, but what got me, and this is why I have such a strained relationship with it, I'm very put off by the length of these films. I was very put off by them because I was just like, and it was always because everyone was like, oh no, we have to watch all three of them. And I'm like, that's literally like half a day. Like you do realize that's so much time. And it's like, yeah, but they're great. I'm like, but I want to go outside. So for a long time, I was kind of put off by just the what sitting down and being like, can I really commit to this? But yeah, and then I finally watched them, all the extended, and I finally got to watch Return of the King in the cinema just last year, and it was so fascinating because it was me realizing, oh yeah, no, these are actually really, really awesome movies, like for so long, and it was nice to experience the extended as well because it flows so nicely, and yeah, I've come to have a new renewed appreciation for these movies. I'm almost kind of glad that I've not spent so long watching them over and over again, though, because the stuff that I forgot or the stuff that I never even saw, for that matter, was such a pleasant experience.
Yeah, I think you probably are speaking from a lot of people's viewpoint as well, because like you said, these films came about and a crucial age for some people. I think I had a very similar experience because the fact that I grew up on Star Wars and I had those VHSs and I would watch those all the time, so it's kind of like I was already invested in one big franchise. And then the fact that, as I already mentioned, a lot of other franchises started to come out at this time. It was kind of like, ooh, am I going to become a Harry Potter person? Am I going to become a Lord of the Rings person? Am I going to become a superhero person? And a lot of these films as well is when that 12A certificate come out. And, I'll be honest, when I was then younger, especially because my cousins would sort of be like, oh, you're like scared of that and that kind of thing. I remember going to see The Fellowship of the Ring, and it's one of my most memorable film experiences. And when I look back in it now, I was like, I absolutely loved that time of seeing it. But again, I think like my parents weren't like big into the length of these films, so I didn't end up going to see Two Towers and Return of the King in the cinema. So I still want to do that. But when I did see Fellowship of the Ring, I was terrified by the ring wraiths. So I kind of was like, oh, maybe I should watch these at home in case I get like terrified again. But that stands out so much to me as a cinema experience now. And I kind of wish that obviously I had that experience of everyone watching Return of the King and tears and all that kind of thing. But yeah, I think, you know, when then Spider-Man came out the next year, it was a similar thing. It was like, oh my God, somebody's got stabbed and, you know, like there's blood. And, you know, at the end of that film, I was like, I shouldn't be watching this. And I think Lord of the Rings was, you know, about that similar time. But that brings in the VHSs because, again, I watched, as soon as they came out of VHS, that would be my first experience of watching the film, whether that be in my bedroom with like a 14-inch combi in which it's like, what's happening there? Or, you know, etc. But so as time has gone on, I've watched them in DVD and Blu-ray and then been like, you know, like you, Chris, has had a renewed appreciation of them. So yeah, everyone has a different story in that sense, I guess. Di, I guess you would have always come from a sort of the book background, as you mentioned at the top.
Yeah, but briefly worth mentioning, I also saw the Fellowship of the Ring in the Barry Cinema.
Ah, okay. Or in the
Yes, we were probably there at the same time.
Very likely. December 2001, obviously, yeah. And that's such a mad time. When did that cinema actually shut?
I don't know if it's flats now, isn't it? The owner of it used to come to the village where I lived, and he always used to call me Tim, because I guess he didn't realise I'm not my uncle. I don't know. But yeah, that's nice.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
If that doesn't say anything about how time has changed now, of like, what's happened to that cinema? It's flats. It's just like everything now. It's like, what happened to that college? It's flats. What happened to that pub? Yeah. It's flats.
What happened to those flats? They're more flats.
What happened to this pile of Lord of the Rings DVDs? Flats. Oh, God.
One does not simply make affordable housing.
What's happened to my high heel shoes? Flats.
Well done.
So my kind of introduction to the story is through the books. Yeah, my grandfather was really into them. He was basically a massive nerd, so he was into all this kind of sci-fi and fantasy forever. And so yeah, he read us The Hobbit as a kid, and then he had this big collection of cassette tapes. There's like a BBC radio adaptation of it, and so on like long trips on holidays in the car, mostly trips to like the castle around Wales. He'd play us the Lord of the Rings, and I was absolutely obsessed with it because it had a map and it had lots of different there's like 20 cassettes in it, so you had to find the right one and change it over. So it was like this kind of magic spell. So within this, you know, phenomenally complex, rich world, in order to actually just kind of dive in and experience it, you had to like rootle around and find the bit, and then look at the map and figure out where they are and who's talking and what's going on. So yeah, that really like blew my mind as a kid. That idea of this world that was so rich with detail and complexity, and that didn't make sense at many points. You know, when you get into the book, when I first read it, so much of it, you know, gets criticized because there's bits that are really weird and dull, and they get eaten by a tree at one point. But that's exactly what I loved about it, to be able to say like, why is Tom Bombadil here? What's happening? So yeah, that was kind of what really got me into it all. And then the movies, they're just a fantastic attempt to get something gigantic actually onto a big screen, and I think they did it, you know, quite well.
We've had VHS corner, we've had VHS mentioned, DVDs, now we've got cassettes as well. What a time for physical media in this podcast.
And it inspired me to, you know, I work in history now, and a lot of that, my love of kind of medieval literature, got into it via The Lord of the Rings, because it's got so many good references.
What was your reaction then on seeing, you know, like as a book lover, etc., like those films adapted, you know, as you said, do you think it was like, oh, these are perfect, you know, was it like kind of like took a bit of time to adjust, you know?
Well, everything is different, isn't it? Of course, they're not perfect, but the books aren't perfect either. So it's an interpretation, isn't it? And what I'm really excited by, and I think it'd be an interesting question later maybe, is are there different ways to, like, could you redo the Lord of the Rings film, or would everyone be really angry if you to suggest we're going to make new Lord of the Rings movies? Because there's a lot of room for adapting it in different ways. The books, the movies miss quite a lot of the marks. So I think that's really interesting.
Stefanos was nodding there. So Stefanos, again, you're a fan. So tell us your experiences. Did you watch any dodgy Greek copies of Lord of the Rings during your childhood?
No. Actually, my relationship with it is a bit more. It's a bit more personal. So when the films came out in cinemas, I didn't get the chance to watch them, mainly because I was a bit too young. And I mean, my dad went to watch them, but never took me. But I don't know why. And But yeah, but it was always the thing that I always knew of. It was, everyone knew Lord of the Rings. It was impossible not to know of it back then. And then, my dad loved them. He bought the DVDs. And I think it was on 2007. Without going like too personal with it, something happened to me. And it was an extremely dramatic experience. And that it kind of was, I was left like on my bed, almost being like catatonic, and I was refusing to speak, to talk, to sleep to anyone. And then all of a sudden, this happens. I looked at the desks and that we had the DVDs on, and I thought to myself, just randomly, it was the only thought I had for like 2 days. And I thought, I've never actually seen The Lord of the Rings properly. Not like each film as a whole, or the three films as one. So I just put them in. That was the first thing I did, an actual physical movement. And and because at that point, the main reason I haven't seen them is because fantasy was never my genre. Same with you, David. I was also into like Star Wars. Star Wars was my thing as a child, and that medieval fantasy was never like something I was attracted to as a kid. But then I started watching the films, and then all of a sudden, it like, they awakened me. They woke me up as a person, and now finally, after like watching it so many times, I started realizing why it affected me so deeply. It's because there's a lot of things about Frodo in the end that I felt really close to him, and the whole journey and the very end, and having that bittersweet finale for him. And I felt that I became him all of a sudden. And so and then I had that emotional catharsis in the end. I still remember, it's the very few times I remember me as a child crying and sobbing at something. And that was it for me. And yeah, and ever since then, I have that personal relationship with his films to a degree that I don't have with any other film. But also, it awakens my sort of love for cinema. I started realizing that I can do that. And ever since then, I watch everything. I try to watch everything I can, trying to seek that kind of emotional reaction. So a lot of the things that I am right now, the person that I am, the love that I have for this medium and this industry, even coming here to the UK to a degree, is because I watched these films at a specific point of time that it was one of my lowest times. I'm getting emotional right now. Yeah, and because of that, I have him so dear to my heart, that that's why you should not remake them. Don't remake them.
Yes, yeah, no, Stefanos would be against that. And we're glad you watched Lord of the Rings, Stefanos, so you could be here to talk movies through your big catalogue, as you mentioned, of watching several films since. And I think a lot of people share that emotion. I remember speaking to a filmmaker before, and they were crying in the screening of Return of the King at the end. And their dad turned to them and said, "Oh, why are you crying? Are you upset about like everyone was happy at the end?" And they said, even as a teenager back then, they said, like, I'm just sad because I know that another film like that will never be made again. And, I think a lot of people do feel that, especially in the fact that they, kind of have semi-made them through, the Hobbit films, etc. They're just not the same. It was a very unique time. And these films, did change cinema a lot. And as we mentioned with memes, etc., they have a lot of memorable moments, a lot of big, huge battle sequences, but also the acting. You mentioned this, Stefanos, Frodo. I think if this was made with any other cast, would it have worked so well? A lot of filmmakers say that they respect Jackson so much for making them all together, and then I think other studios and filmmakers have tried to do that. often with varying results, sometimes not great, maybe because the films feel a bit too kind of like part one, part two. But these being books, I think it works a lot better. And it just makes for the films to be very consistent. You know, there's no loss of, you know, kind of certain actors, or there's no kind of changing of even locations or that kind of thing, or this, you know, even when I was listing the crew and everything, it's like it's the same cinematographer, it's the same, you know, editing crew, etc. So all of that really helps. Craig, when you think of this film, is there any sort of like standout moments? Do you have as big a sort of legacy with it? Obviously, I know we would have seen like the Hobbit trilogy in the cinema together, but I've never sort of discussed Lord of the Rings with you.
Yeah, so I mean, look, I acknowledge these films as being fantastic, but I think, again, given fantasy is not my wheelhouse, these never had like a big impact on me specifically growing up. So I remember watching the first one with my sister and my cousins together, but that was because that was sort of a sleepover that also just got sort of disjointed, you know, so watch the first half at like night and then the second half in the morning. I can't really remember when I saw the other two, but I have seen the other two, probably with one of the various sort of friendship groups who wanted to watch Lord of the Rings at some point, whether that just be after sort of like on a lazy Sunday morning, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, you just have to acknowledge just how fantastic these films necessarily are. Like the craft that necessarily goes into them. The fact that it ends up being some of the like the pioneering films that necessarily utilize like certain techniques to the degree that they were, and also just not completely overblown at that point, right? People obviously look back to say the way that Gollum was rendered within that film, and just look specifically at the way that CGI sort of changed the landscape of films. Obviously, it wasn't the first film to use it, but it was one of the ones to utilize it to such a degree, but also just to such a significant quality. But also just the fact that, as you say, like some of the battle sequences, like the fact that, so I have not rewatched these films, but you kept saying to me, like, rewatch the Battle of Helm's Deep because you're a nerd.
Well, I just knew that is the battle scene to watch and talk about.
Yeah, so obviously I think that's a significant highlight. And also just the fact that it is the sort of franchise that I think brought fantasy to a lot of people's attention. Before, I think that there was such a heavy negative association of like fantasy elements just being very, very nerdish culture. And I think that these films just brought it to an audience in such a like an admittedly cool way. I think a lot of people just had to acknowledge it and sort of stop giving sort of like the Dungeons and Dragons players as much grief as sort of given within mainstream society at that point.
Di is dying inside now with his Excalibur kind of love. Just feel like Excalibur's there, like the way fantasy used to be looked at, with the crazy characters being like, it's a nightmare, and like Lord of the Rings comes along like, no, we're cool, we're not like you. Shelley, what about for yourself? What's like a favorite scene? What is like, when you think of this trilogy, what is your absolute go-to, or like the best of the best?
Oh my gosh. I remember really loving all the scenes at Rivendell, just because you've got, so I read the books probably when I was about 10. My dad's a big fantasy fan, so he introduced me to them, and he introduced me to The Hobbit as well. And there was a man who did artwork and drawings for the books called Alan something, if someone can help me out, if anyone knows. Anyway, and he did concept art for the films as well, and Rivendell just looked exactly like I had always pictured it in the book. So I think just as like a collaborative effort of everyone knowing how important these books are, down to the finest details, they really wanted to get it right. And I think, yeah, Rivendell really, it comes in just before the halfway point of the first film. Really the first time outside of the Shire, but it's a place of safety. Yeah, I love those. The Rivendell scenes for me.
Yeah, you mentioned like being made by the fans. It's like, I'm not sure if it's only in the extended ones, but it's like if you watch it at home, or if I don't know if they're doing this in the cinema, but when
in
it
the
has,
credits.
yeah, and it's like the
fan club.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, it just keeps going and going
I
and
think
going.
it's about I think it's in the credits of Return of the King. They are last, and it's something like half an hour, 45 minutes of just
Wow. Well,
thousands and thousands of names.
really, they should put that in like, Two Towers or something. So if anybody's doing like a marathon in the cinema, they know they've got a good amount of time before the next film starts.
True.
Yeah. But yeah, Rivendell, I think, it is just a great example of practical and, CG as well, which these films pull off really well. There's that Lego set that they've made of it recently, which is like, that is gorgeous. I need this Lego set. And yeah, it just feels like its own world. It's completely separate from everything else you see in it.
Definitely.
And, the autumnal vibes, definitely. Laura, what's a standout for you? Is there kind of like favorite character or favorite scene?
I think my favorite scene throughout the three is probably when the Ents all come and flood all the orcs. I think mostly because Merry and Pippin, they're like, no, it's not our war to fight, blah, blah, blah. And then they walk through the trees and they're like, oh, damn, they've taken all our trees. Yeah, we're going to rough them up now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not having any of this. And that is just great. And I think one of the best parts of that entire scene is where one of the Ents is on fire.
Yes.
And he dunks his head in the water. That is brilliant. That is a really great part.
It's just attention to detail in it. And also, the Treebeard's like outrage at Saruman, where he's like, "Oh, wizard should know better," and like that anger and stuff like that. And again, I'm sure, as Di would discuss, when anybody's read the books, etc., it's those themes of like nature versus industry and stuff like that, which are still so prevalent today. Which I think means that it speaks to people in that way.
Favorite music for me.
Oh, okay.
The score, obviously. The most phenomenal score of all time. Shut up, John Williams.
Oh.
And I will die on this hill. I think the motifs that thread through all three films, with the variation to the point where, like, I don't know, down to details like how Rohan's motifs are all slightly different compared to Gondor's motifs, which are more uniform and things like that. There's so much detail. But for me, like, despite being obsessed with the entire score, my favorite moment in Lord of the Rings is just any time you get the Isengard orc motif. Du-du-du, dun-dun. I used to go around school banging it on tables, humming it under my breath. There is nothing that draws you into the epicness of that, like of any film, like those kinds of horns and those kinds of drums. And I think especially when you've got the troops moving in the background and the industrial things going on, it just shows you technically how amazing the sound effects are. Like, I don't know if we're going to hear some this in the fun facts a bit later, but I'm told that they went into a cricket stadium and got people to do a load of stomping and chanting to pull off the orc sounds better and carry it over into the film. I just think, for like all these reasons, my favorite moments of the film are just any audio related to orcs. So yeah.
Yeah, and to be clear as well, 2 episodes ago we were talking about History of Violence and Howard Shore did the music there, and I was like, I felt it was like quite misplaced. Because it felt very Lord of the Rings, he's very orchestral and big. But, I absolutely love like this score. And as a, John Williams lover, everything he's done for Star Wars. But I will say that I can't sit down and work to John Williams. I'm not going to be walking down the street or driving home to the Imperial March. It's weird. Whereas, put on the Hobbiton music, lovely time, like, oh, chill out, put on a bit of Hobbit music. Maybe you wouldn't have a chill out with the Isengard music, like you said there, but it's because there is that variety there in the score that you've got the chilled stuff, you've got like the evil stuff, you've got like the more epic stuff, of course, like them going over the mountain in Fellowship of the Ring, the do 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 do, and I think I had the Bridge of Khazad-dûm sort of like theme, as they call it. That was like my ringtone or something on, one of those old, when you buy like a ringtone back in the day, that was one of the ringtones I had. So yeah, an absolutely epic and amazing score. And And also shout out to the end songs. I really love in the Fellowship of the Ring. That's one of my favorite moments, is when Frodo tries to go alone and Sam is like, you're not going without me. And he's like, go back, Sam. And it's that music that plays at the end of Fellowship. I just find it so beautiful. It's just such a like moving kind of like the journey is about to begin and they're kind of in this like perilous place. And, you've got Aragorn saying, we'll find the hobbits and everyone's going off on their own path. And then it has like a song like All That May It Be. And it's just so ethereal and so like kind of angelic. It's just amazing. Yeah. Like, so big shout out to the music.
Actually, fun thing about my life back then, my mom sees a soprano for the National Television Company of Greece.
Oh, I remember you saying this, yeah.
And her choir worked with the National Orchestra as well, and they did a show of all the music, the whole music of Harvard Show for Lord of the Rings in one of our ancient stages in Greece. And I do believe Howard Shaw was there as well. I do believe was one of the conductors that participated in the recording of the films. And yeah, they were there on the stage, or with effects going on these like 1,000 ancient rocks like on it. And yeah, it was a great experience. Again, I hadn't seen the films back then, had no idea what was happening, but I was just me, be a wee kid, being like, wow, this sounds pretty.
Yeah, like you think of like the do the like Theoden's or theme and stuff like that, like the fact that they've got their own like Rohan and stuff, like the fact that they've got like their own theme, and you think of that and you're sort of transported to there, and then yeah, Hobbiton, and they're all very individual. It's fantastic.
Well, I think what they did back then is, because there was a lot of choir, but I think they were doing rearrangements of a lot of the themes being with choirs. So I remember like the Fellowship theme, and as well with Rohan, they did specific arrangements for that to be accompanied with the choirs.
Chris, what about yourself for sort of favorite characters, favorite scenes, favorite lines?
Just to follow up on Liv's point about the music, yeah, absolutely. Such an amazing eclectic mix of styles of music. Like in terms of favorite scenes, oh gosh, I mean, the one that always comes back to me is just the fight with the Balrog. I mean, it's just incredible. But then in terms of like the music, it's Gandalf's Fall. Like that music is so goddamn heartbreaking, and that scene as well.
When I was looking up the memes, one of them was mentioned was like the music, like that scene being used by YouTubers to echo like traumatic experiences. So when like you drop your toast or something and using that music, so like that.
Yeah,
that it's hard for me to describe in words, but yeah, that's definitely been memed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But like when you hear it and then you watch it, and it's just so effective. Like the Fly You Fool. I mean, obviously, just like You Shall Not Pass.
Yes.
Ian McKellen, you legend, just nailing that whole sequence. And then yeah, Fly You Fools. And then what follows. And I think the thing as well with that scene in particular was because it's so, when you see the hobbits crying, it's so just genuinely heartbreaking. They've lost someone so special to them.
Yeah.
And also like a central character being taken out at that stage as well in such a way. Like that, yeah, that's an amazing piece of music, an amazing sequence. But I think there is a scene that that might take precedence, and it's because I saw it for the first time in the cinema. It's the Army of the Dead.
Okay.
That sequence in Return of the King. I saw that on the big screen for the first time, and Christ alive, it was amazing. I was literally like leaning forward, goosebumps on my arms, and just that line: "The dead do not suffer the living to pass.
Yeah.
You will suffer me." Oh my God, that's so awesome! It was an amazing scene, and yeah, there's so many great scenes in these films. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so well loved as a trilogy, because it's just it's an amalgamation of just some of the most perfect pieces of cinema ever crafted. It's brilliant stuff.
I think that's what helps with, like, for me sometimes when you try to think of each film, and maybe that's why sort of Two Towers not that I'm saying it's the lesser film, but I think Fellowship, I think, like Rivendell, and you can think of that kind of like, the autumnal, the Hobbit ton and everything like that. And then Return of the King, you think of the green of the ghosts and everything like that, and Mordor and everything. So whereas like Two Towers, if you were looking at like the color palette, it's very gray, and there's kind of Helm's Deep, is probably the biggest, most memorable scene of that film. But again, that's very dark, at night. So when I think of like, the colors or the visual memories of Lord of the Rings, those are why those two stand out more for me. Di, what about yourself? What's a standout?
Well, I mean, Laura directly quoted my favorite line of the whole, trilogy of, I'm not having that. Let's rough 'em up, lad. It's like poetry. What a line. But no, the sequence that really interested me when I was younger is I really like the sequence where the hobbits are trying to get out of the Shire and fleeing the Dark Riders. And I really like it because it's very different from how it was in the book. But both, in the book, it's much slower. And I loved it in the book. It's so weird and mysterious. And it's this really recognizable landscape. They're just walking through these fields, but in the distance, there's this sort of black rider, just sort of standing, looking sort of thing. And it's this really strange, mysterious, and tense sequence. But obviously, you can't do it like that in a movie because it's really slow. And in the book, there's this really long-winded and boring plan about how they're going to. He's pretending he's moving to another house at the edge of the Shire, sort of thing, which is brilliant in the book and it really works. But yeah, it's a bit that you obviously would struggle to adapt. And so having it is that suddenly hurried chase and like this really twisting, strange, and the world is sort of almost twisting on its head for the characters. And the kind of recognizable landscape is going darker, and they're going into the kind of roots of the trees, and then the lane itself becomes a dangerous thing. It's a very different version from what was in the book, but it works fantastically. And that's it's quite rare in adaptations for to divert from the source material, but do it just as well. And a lot of the movie the trilogy managed to do that, and that's the thing I always find really interesting is seeing those differences and how you can change something but do it as good.
A much more subtle version of that one, which people always bring up from Harry Potter, with like, Dumbledore calmly asked, Harry, did you put your name in the Goblet of Fire? And then like film version, like, that sounds like the equivalent of that, which is much more drawn out and much more subtle. But yeah, that is always going to be a big thing with, adaptations, I suppose, is those changes. One thing I guess I was going to ask you as well, Di, was how do you feel about the literal eye of Sauron? I guess from your vibes that you would be like, yay, giant eye, but like some people would be like, that's just dumb, like you've gone with the literal thing of that, what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, the original one is borderline with literal eye. I mean, it's a tower, supposedly inspired by the tower at Birmingham University, where he spent some time. So in the middle of the uni, there's this, it's sort of in a dish, in a bowl-shaped area. So all the kind of like student housing and kind of riders around it. In the middle, you've got this tower with the really big clock tower with really bright coloured faces. And it is like the university's looking at you. So if you've got like an essay that you're running late on, this bloody university's eye is gazing at you no matter where your digs are.
Please tell me it's not flats now. It's not flats.
Well, it's all student flats all around it. The tower is still there.
It's flats now.
So that's what people think, and supposedly that's kind of it was a kind of a literal tower with an eye in it like that. So, and it brings it to life. One of the challenges of adapting it is that Sauron doesn't really exist as a person. He is this abstract, distant thing. It's really weird to be in a visual medium. It's really weird to be in any medium where the villain doesn't really exist and we never meet them. So yeah, it's a really big challenge to bring that to life, and I think they do it really excellently. Tolkien himself resorts to bringing in somebody else to play the mouth of Sauron, which is slightly bizarre, and they do it in the extended parts of the movie as well, don't they? But kind of really cool and interesting and weird.
Yeah, some of the things I can see why that wasn't in the theatrical. I think all of them, you're like, yes, the extended version makes sense. Everything there deserves its place. I think Two Towers for me is like the one which benefits the most. It's the best film for having that sort of like cut. But the Return of the King, omissions are the ones which I find kind of like more offensive. Like that one when I see the Mouth of Sauron, which yeah, it's strange to have the Mouth of Sauron, but the fact that he gives them the mithril to the group and then that spurs them on to be like for Frodo and everything. I'm like, but you lose them like thinking that he's died. So like I was like that's a big loss I think for the theatrical version. But also, you know, I gotta sort of shout out my guy Christopher Lee, you know, like losing, not being in the theatrical cut, which obviously he was very upset about. But in terms of favorite moments and stuff like that, you know, lines, you know, how can you not think of him like, you know, to war? You know, he's just so, you know, perfectly cast in that. You know, interestingly, I think he said that he would have liked to be Gandalf, you know, back in the day. But yeah, just the way they make him up with like his creepy hands and, you know, in Fellowship, like when he's like there, like yodeling on the top of the tower and bringing down the snow, he's just so evil and just like so sinister. And like the scene with like the wizard battle with him and Gandalf, and the fact he just like, that's something that always plays in my head. Like you live saying about like the music, something I'll often think or just reenact is just like, you know, him like just literally pinning him down and like, you will die, you know, and spinning him around like that. It's just amazing. I just love him as a character and the way he plays it, and how, you know, he always tries to make sure like, you know, that he doesn't trip up on the like robes and stuff like that, you know, and the way he sort of handles the sphere and everything is, it's just an amazing performance. And I think, as we've mentioned, the performances play so much to this, like Gandalf. Like when you think of him in the beginning of Fellowship saying like, you haven't aged a day, and I was thinking about it before and I was like, everyone is playing it like they've played the characters for like 10 years. It's not like they've, you know, oh, that actor's great at it because they've been doing it for so long. They almost bring like a kind of like legacy with them. I think even like said, you know, Elijah Wood, who's like very new to the industry at this stage, you know, you're kind of drawn to his performance as soon as you see him like sat there, you know, at the beginning of the film. And when he like jumps on Gandalf, you can get that excitement and everything. So they all just smash it. They all just knock it out the park, you know, like Merry Pippin, etc. They all just do such a good job, I think, which I'm hearing like a lot of Fellowship getting brought up as well, which I'm happy about because I'm a Fellowship guy. So without description or anything, just the name. But if you're going to go for one of the films, which one is it going to be? Shelley?
Two Towers.
Two Towers. Laura?
Yeah.
Fellowship.
Fellowship. Stefanos?
Ah, man.
I'll come back to you.
Get back to
Die.
Fellowship of the Ring.
Liv?
Well, when it's released, it will be the extended cut of Return of the King. So I finally get to see Faramir's wedding.
Oh, okay. Right. Interesting. Chris, have you made up your mind?
It's either Fellowship or Return of the King. It's I'm gonna say probably Fellowship because it is the one I've seen the most, and it's the one I definitely have a lot of really sweet connections with. But I think as years go by, that might, if I watch Return of the King more, it might change.
And Stefanos?
Okay, so on my letterboxd, I put Fellowship of the Ring only because it doesn't allow me to have the whole trilogy as a one entry. But in reality, it's Return, and I think it's because it's the catharsis, it's the ending, it's the one that I cry 4 times the last 20 minutes. So yes, Return.
Fair. Liv, is this extended cut going to star Sean Benham? Maybe that's where he appears.
It should star many different misspellings, I'm sure.
And the unknown.
Because we'll never make it, but I'm waiting. Fingers crossed.
Yes. Okay.
Win another 11 Oscars.
Yes, yeah. So let's also go then to, you know, we talked about favorite scenes, etc. We've talked about the music. Is there anything else people want to shout out in terms of like the cast or like the special effects, anything that stands out? Laura, is there like a favorite character or like even like a prop or costume which you're like, you nailed that?
I'm really, really sad that Tom Bombadil isn't in the film. I only recently read The Fellowship, actually. I had the book since I think we went to see the film, and my dad bought me the book with the cover of the film on it. So it must have been
right.
Literally, they must have reprinted it because the film was coming out. And I tried so many times to read it and I just couldn't read it. I think I was at the point where I was too young to read it because it's quite a difficult
dense book, yeah.
And so yeah, it's only recently I've read it. I knew of Tom Bombadil, but when I read him in Fellowship, I was like, why isn't he in the film? He's great. He's like, I think he's my favorite character in the entire book. But I don't know whether that's because he's not in the film that you get like the first your first impression of him from the book. And I will always say this, the books are always better than the film, regardless of what book it is. The book is always better than the film. But yeah, it was redeemed a little bit though, because Tom Bombadil actually stars in the Lego Lord of the Rings game.
Okay.
So I'm happy that he's in this somewhere in that kind of media that he is there. But yeah, Tom Bombadil should have been in the film.
Yeah, well, again, more repping of media. We've got, VHSs, cassettes, video games, and Lego video games specifically.
What? Tom Bombadil was who Sean Benham was playing.
Ah, we've got to the bottom of it. There we go. I think the one that does stand out for me is Arwen, because it's such a difficult role to play, especially for Liv Tyler, because she's like, you're not going to be with any of the other cast the majority of the time. But she just like absolutely brings it when she's first introduced, like, when she's like, come and claim him. And I love that scene with the ring wraiths and the water, like tidal wave that comes and the horses. I think that's just cinema right there. That's just so fantastic. And then for her to kind of like hold her own throughout the rest of the franchise. I remember when I was young, I was a bit like, oh, here we go. Here's another love scene. But again, you feel her presence so much throughout those films. And I think everyone kind of complements each other's performance when you look at like the elves. I think that, Kate Blanchett, when I was a kid, I was just like, what is going on to the, I just didn't understand that. Like, I will be a queen. And it's just like the effects on it is so strange, but it's so memorable. But again, she does a fantastic job. When I've rewatched the film, I'm like watching her and I'm like, does she ever blink? And she doesn't. And they put like, I think they put like LEDs or something in her eyes. So she just looks so mystical. I'm still a bit torn on like her having some sort of like superpower scene in the Hobbit films. But here she just, again, you only see her at certain moments and she just like speaks to characters from like one location. And same with Elrond. Like I think so many of the elves make such an impression, such great characters. And talking about female characters as well, the last bit I'd mention is Eowyn, when she, like, I am no man, and stabs him in the hood like that. That's just such a fantastic scene. Shelley, what about yourself? Any other sort of standout characters? Props, characters?
Yeah. Oh, in terms of props, I think it's like the ultimate like creaky old tome in the Mines of Moria. The dusty old book and the way it creaks open just before Pippin like it's Pippin.
Yeah. One of my favorite memes is that like, and I took that personally, like have you seen the one with the Balrog and he's just like, they were like rummaging around him, and he's like, and I took that personally. And then and then there's like a Gandalf one, he's just like, Pippin was existing and I took that personally.
Yeah, so that to me is like, I don't know, a lot of the props are just really, really pretty and they look weathered and used, and nothing looks like it's just come out of a workshop. It looks like it's in that world, it's being used. So yeah, big shout out to all the prop work, I think.
Stefanos, any standouts for you for character prop wise?
Props, I could go for hours. It's insane. More or less what Shelley has said. It's like all of them look real, but not meaning like not a typical thing I would say about films look real, that they look like they have been existing for a long time. But when it comes to characters, and I think that kind of is more about the actors specific, there are four standouts for me. One, as we all kind of mentioned about Ian McKellen, it's not even the things that make him like a badass or like the action sequences. It's the quiet moments that I love. There's just sort of like this tenderness that he has his eyes and the sensitivity that he presents when he talks about the hobbits, the human element that makes him different than Saruman, because there's more or less to be comparison between the two wizards, and what makes them different is the one that actually that doesn't have any compassion, that joins with the evil and just goes to the mass production and destruction of the environment and the people. But then we have the other one who actually cares and wants and believes in something better. That he is the most optimistic one, even though he's the one that realizes the potential of real danger. And I love that. And whenever he talks about Frodo, he always brings this like this loving like old man in the village, you know, the one that always, it's almost like he has seen, I mean, he has seen Frodo being born, always from a distance, always tried to take care of him. And then when he becomes into an adult, he always is still protective of him. And I always love that. And then the other three, Andy Serkis, because it's Andy Serkis. Like, he did what a lot of people back at that time didn't deem to be, big quotes, real art or real acting. And still people did think that, but because of his performance, we look at so many other people who have done motion capture, and like there's a whole gaming industry based on this kind of performances now. The whole, what he did, it's the people within that industry that celebrate it, but it's not fully celebrated yet in the film industry, and it should. Because again, what he does, even if you put it as voice acting, even his voice acting is amazing. Like, you can tell from where each personality comes in, even though he uses exactly the same voice, the specific pauses and punctuations. And then when we talk to the actual acting, the movements, the expressions that he uses, all of that is visible. That he wouldn't have been able to make Gollum the way they did if he didn't have his performance. And then as for the other two, Elijah Wood, we already said why, for my own personal reasons. Especially in the end, you can see the transformation, you know, that Frodo from the very beginning, but he was all smiling and happy. He never wanted anything else. He didn't care about adventures. He was happy where he was. And that Frodo is gone. Like, it's gone, unfortunately. And you can see that deterioration that's from Elijah Wood's eyes. Like, slowly he's dying. And then even when everything is done, he still is dead.
Well, that's another scary moment, like in the Fellowship, like when I was a kid, you know, that like, oh, my old ring, you know, is Bilbo, but like when he's just like, you know, that is terrifying. Like that, like screenshot you get of just him like reaching out, you know, and like you said, that's an echo of what Frodo could become.
Yeah, like funny thing is, a friend of mine, he has never seen the films, and I was showing to him last year, and we were reaching to the point at the end of Mount Doom. And he was freaking out when Frodo was saying, the ring is mine. And he literally thought that everything was going to go to absolutely worst case scenario. And that is a lot from Elijah Wood's performance, because that was the moment that Frodo Baggins died. But then the final smile in the end when he's about to leave into the West, it was like the small return of Frodo. And that is because of Wood. But then finally, the actual MVP of the whole thing is Sean Astin as Samwise Gamgee. It's the absolute hero that no one was expecting, and like it's a pure like underdog hero story. It's him, and you know, and still I'm very angry that he did not get nominated for an Oscar back then, even though the film did win 11 out of 11 nominations. He should have been nominated. He should have won. But yes, as Samwise Gamgee, Samwise the Brave, legend.
Yeah, he is fantastic. Just such an epitome of like, you know, friendship and just like, yeah, that whole like, you know, I can't carry it, but I'll carry you. You know, it's fantastic. And so iconic. And you mentioned in Gollum as well, made me think of another moment, which in some ways reminds me of mine and Craig's friendship sometimes, is that scene where Faramir, like, he's just like, what did they take from you? And like he turns around and he's like, my precious, and he just does that like, bah! It's just like the intensity and the scream, and you can just feel it. It's like both funny and terrifying, which again, you know, as we mentioned through memes, you know, there's just so many iconic funny moments, but you know, whether they're intended, but also dark and like kind of unsettling. Liv, any other sort of like funny, sort of memeable standout performances or props or anything?
I mean, as for humor, I feel like for me, the funny things are just the things that were intended to be funny, which obviously shows how good it was. I mean, Two Towers would be the most depressing experience of your life if you didn't have those intentionally funny moments at some points. But like, as for favorite props or characters, that kind of thing, I think I have some very specific ones that I don't think necessarily other people would relate to. For props, it's specifically the armor of I don't know which age each of them are. It's been a very long time since I've read the books, but the really old elves. Because it's really, really fascinating to see how like the props team get them to relate so well to the present day elves, and like you can see how over time they've changed but how they're still from the same culture, and that fascinated me as a child, and that's what made me want to be an elf and want to like love the elves in Middle Earth and want to be a part of it. Not the plot, not the characters, not the dialogue, but the specific change of the armor in such a nuanced way, but also a delicate way and a cultural way. And that was brilliant to see. But then favorite character, again, it's something I don't think anyone else would really say. It would be Faramir, but not for the dialogue, but for the physicality. Because in, well, two films with so much action that Faramir is getting a glimpse in, or one, depending on what your perspective is here. But he's engaging in so much action. He's engaging in so much dark stuff. He's being compared to someone who inherently is quite violent, both practically and metaphorically. He doesn't get much of his own character development in isolation, and yet David Wenham just puts across this air of the scholarliness that Faramir has without needing any words, without needing much screen time at all. And like having, again, barely read the books and very long ago, for some reason, he manages to portray to me that he is the scholarly type, that he is potentially the warrior philosopher that he should be portrayed as. I think that is, everyone talks about Christopher Lee and all the phenomenal actors there. But I just think this needs to be appreciated so much more than it's given credit for.
Yes, yeah, he has a very heartbreaking performance. And again, that's why I think the extended edition really like comes through, because you see so much more of that comparison. And like with John Noble, you know, he's such a sinister, evil, horrible character with the father and everything. And, you know, that really, again, comes through so well in Return of the King, of just that callousness of like, and again, that's become a joke of like, you know, well, Boromir would have done that. But, you know, you can really feel for him and understand, you know, his position. So he does a fantastic job of sort of standing out.
I joke that how we viewed Liz Truss and a cabbage is how Denethor viewed Faramir and a tomato.
Yes, but just with a yes or no, I think it would be amiss if we didn't mention Viggo Mortensen. There's been a lot of thirst chat for him in the Well Good Movies chat recently. So just everyone with a collective yes or no, just if you say it at once, do you agree? Is Viggo Mortensen a goat in that sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, no controversial opinions there then.
All right, take those cassettes, rewind them, and play them again, because it's time for VHS Corner. So as already alluded to, Dai is going to be talking to us a lot about the Lord of the Rings concept in the books. So very much not on the film, but very much on the actual story itself. So Dai, over to you.
Hello, welcome to my corner. I'm excited to be here. I'm surrounded by old tomes. I'm going to focus on really kind of some of the inspirations behind Tolkien's work. I thought that might be interesting to have a look at, because they're the bits that don't get seen as much. and I'll rattle through a couple, and then we can just open the floor because everyone else here knows at least one amazing weird trivia fact that they can bring to the table. So I don't need to do that. You guys can do the heavy lifting. But for the first bit, this is down to where the names come from. So one of the things people tend to say about Tolkien's writing is that, you know, this world he made was so rich and diverse and original, and that he creates entire languages and things. But actually, particularly in his early writing, a lot of what he was doing was lifting quite directly from early medieval sources. Really, what he was doing was taking early medieval writing and rewriting it in his own image and in ways that he thought was interesting. So there's a quote from Icelandic saga, well, Icelandic collection of poems called the Poetic Edda. The poem is called the Voluspa, which is this great poem about the creation and destruction of the Scandinavian world. But see if you can spot how this influenced, extremely directly influenced the Lord of the Rings. So kind of stop me when you reach the part that's good. But so yeah, it starts off with who the deep dwelling dwarves was to make of Brimir's blood and Blind's bones. Motsogni arose, the mighty ruler, the kin of the dwarves. But Durin next molded many man-like bodies, the dwarves under earth, as Durin bade them. And then it lists the dwarves that Durin obeyed. Nai and Nethi, Nofri and Suthri, Anstri, Vestri, Alchioth, Dvalin, Nar and Nine, Niping, Dain, Beaver, Boffer, Bomber, and Nori. An, Ona, Al, Miot Vintir, Vague, and Gandalf. So yeah, and then later on he's got Billy Killy, Fundin, and Nal. So yeah, when he was creating in The Hobbit the list of the names of all the dwarves who pop up, he's literally just lifting them from this old poem, and he included Gandalf among them. So the name of Gandalf is originally the name of a dwarf that he took away and made into something else. I thought was cool. The other two main, well, the one main book that's relevant for the Lord of the Rings is a book called the Volsunga Saga, the Saga of the Volsungs. So this is another Icelandic book from the early medieval, or kind of a bit later into it, but that has a load of it is themes and ideas that pop up. In particular, back to Gandalf, the description of Gandalf is pretty much lifted directly from the descriptions of Odin. So what people tend to see Odin as nowadays is this great kind of Zeus-like, you know, champion of the gods sat on a big throne. But actually in the literature, in the sagas, he appears more often as the wandering figure. He's a man with many names. There's a list of Odin's names. So Gandalf has loads and loads of names. Everywhere he goes, he wanders, someone gives him a different name. That's the same with Odin, actually. And Odin is described as being this old, bent old man with a long grey beard and a big, wide-brimmed hat. The reason Odin wears a wide-brimmed hat is that it leans over his missing eye, so you don't realise it's him. And he has this big staff. So in the Volsunga Saga, this becomes relevant and linked to later bits. So the other element that comes directly from the Volsunga Saga is the broken sword. So the sword that was broken and is reforged, that belongs to Sigurd. His ancestor gets given the sword by Odin, and later on he swings it at Odin's staff and it smashes. So Sigurd has to get it reforged. The other detail that's pretty big that comes from the Volsunga Saga is the Ring of Power itself, the Ring of Andvari. So it's a really common theme in Icelandic and European Scandinavian literature is often magic rings, but particularly cursed items. So a ring of this amazing power, it gives you kind of indeterminate good fortune, but you're also going to get done in later sort of thing. So he took this really common theme and he ran with it and he made it into such a bigger, richer, more kind of complex and interesting tone, which is really cool. Briefly, if you're interested, the other book that has a big impact on The Hobbit in particular is Beowulf. A lot of details of Beowulf go directly into The Hobbit, but that's not what we're talking about as much now. I thought then I'd look at the Welshlings because that's where we are and we're the coolest. So there's not as many really, but the elves really come from Welsh and Irish literature. The language in itself is based on not directly the words, but the grammar and the sort of form of kind of pronunciation, how it sounds very Welsh, and he deliberately did that. And really, they're based on in Welsh and Irish literature, you've got the fair folk, who are these kind of ancient race of magical kings and queens sort of thing, but they're mysterious and magical. And so all these ideas of hidden places where they're living, that's very, very much from that old literature, and particularly the Welsh stuff, where they tend to live somewhere in the woods. You stumble through the woods and you accidentally end up in the fairies' kind of hall, and you disappear often, and they're dangerous and they're mysterious. So they're called the Tylwyth Teg in Welsh, and the Taith Danann in Irish literature. But that means the fair folk and children of Danann. But there's other little details. The one that I think is really cool, traveling west, is when they go over the water into the Undying Lands. It's quite directly from King Arthur as he goes to Avalon. He travels over water into an undying island. And in fact, on the Isle of Valinor, so the continent in Middle-earth is called Valinor, but on the edge of it, there's a little island, which is actually called Avalon. So he's just taken the name, whacked it in there as a mini reference, because that's what he was taking it from. And the other final detail from that is the book itself. So in the books, The Lord of the Rings is actually a story that's taken from a much bigger ancient codex, and it's called the Red Book of Westmarch, which is, again, directly inspired by one of the books, an ancient book of Welsh literature, Welsh and Latin literature, called the Red Book of Hergest. The other famous book is the White Book of Rhydderch. So that's where loads of this amazing old Celtic literature comes from. They're all hidden among this big old book. So he lifted that quite directly and turned it into the Red Book of Westmarch, of which Lord of the Rings was found. The final thing I'm going to mention, which is my own tin pot theory, but there is proof and it is relevant, and it's going to, other than movies and Lord of the Rings, what's all of our favorite thing? Rugby. We all love rugby. It's the best. And the Lord of the Rings, actually, rugby had genuinely a really big impact on the Lord of the Rings. It had a big impact on Tolkien's life. He was quite a keen rugby player. He played all the way through school. He's the captain of the school team. He played in university for Oxford. In fact, the very first published poem he wrote was published in his school magazine, and it was called The Battle of the Eastern Field, and it's a spoof medieval poem about a rugby game. So he really was genuinely super into rugby. And within rugby, and what was described when Rugby School wrote the rules, the principles of the game are quite unique, and they really do influence the book in, I think, really interesting ways. So one of the core principles in rugby is the idea that no matter what size or shape you are, there's a position for you. So if you're kind of little and squat and strong, you can be a prop. If you're tall and waif-like and flighty, you can play on the wing. And this directly translates into things like Legolas and Gimli. No matter what size or shape you are in the Lord of the Rings, there's something you can contribute to the wider team. And again, of course, Legolas and Gimli demonstrate this really directly. But then it goes down to how the hobbits, even though you're really little, you can't kill like 12 orcs at once. But, Merry can stab the Witch King in the back of the leg. And that's actually just as important as some of the stuff everyone else is doing. Frodo doesn't slay any monsters. He just gets rid of a ring, but that's equally important. So no matter what size or shape you are, which is not common in many sports, and actually it's not common in a lot of fantasy literature, but it really is there in the Lord of the Rings. It's the core point of it. And the fact that there's no one is more important than anyone else, really, even Aragorn the king. So in rugby, doesn't matter how good you are, if everyone else in the team isn't also good, you're stuck. And that's the case with the Lord of the Rings. Aragorn, the great hero, he never slays any monsters. He's not the archetypal superhero that you would expect from a fantasy story, who would turn up and slay the Dark Lord or the dragon or whatever. He just leads people and sets an example that everyone else follows. And again, that's very much rugby. And the final detail, which really where I noticed it, is the tactility in the Lord of the Rings. So something really struck me when I was younger reading it was how much characters touch and hug and they kiss at times. And at the very end, Sam literally carries Frodo up the mountain. They're all very tactile. They touch each other and they push each other forward a lot. And again, that's very rugby. They're literally it's a sport about kind of wrapping your arms around each other and pushing each other forwards towards a common goal. It's a fellowship is the whole concept behind it. So yeah, we know that Lord Tolkien was super into rugby, And we know that those themes do pop up in his books, and they're themes which don't really translate into many other works of fantasy literature. You know, that kind of togetherness, the lack of macho-ness, is quite unique to The Lord of the Rings. And I think one of the details that makes it really special. So I think that's cool. And then what else about the movies does everyone else think is cool?
No, I thought that was all really interesting. Especially, believe it or not, the rugby discussion. I think that's a really good, really cool way of sort of breaking down the positions within the game, but also just making it into to fit within a medieval-esque story. So no, that's really interesting. Thank you very much, Dai.
And I think in terms of movie knowledge, so for the legacy bit for Movie Vault, I'm going to go to some specific people. So I'll just ask specific people here for like any other facts that they might have. But I know that friend of the show and previous guest Jake Hart, he's a massive Lord of the Rings nerd, so I had to ask him any involvement for facts. And his favorite movie fact is the fact that one Weta Workshop, again, they had like 2 people employed purely just to make chainmail, the entire production. So for 2 years, that's all these people did was just make chainmail, which shows how much was made for the film. But also the fact that Sean Bean was so like off-put by taking helicopters up to the mountains when they had to do the mountain stuff that he decided to climb up the mountains instead every day. So each day the cast would just see like this little dot of a person walking up the mountain they were about to film on, and it was Sean Bean who had just woken up like 4 to 6 hours earlier to go up the mountain, which is definite commitment.
Wasn't that mentioned on one of our previous episodes for some reason?
Possibly, yeah.
I definitely remember talking about that.
Yeah, it seems familiar. So Shelley, anything else that stands out for yourself?
Yeah, probably nothing new that people haven't heard before. I always think it's cute that Peter Jackson's children play the 2 little hobbits, and apparently they're some of the like only actors in the film who didn't have to have a wig because their hair was just hobbity, curly and sort of ringlety anyway. I quite like that. And the same with Sam and Rosie's little girl being held by Sean Astin. That's his daughter. And actually, I think it was a few weeks ago, they posted her graduation photos and stuff. And I don't like the passage of time.
It's like the fact that the Teletubbies' son baby has now got her own baby. It's
she
like,
has her own
oh
baby.
God.
Yeah, I don't know why that came to mind, but I like that it's sort of the cast and crew, their children now are just part of this, the hugest franchise ever. And it's
why I highlighted the lady who played his wife, because I thought, well, you know, she's not in anything else. She's literally like in those 3 films and maybe like 2 other things. But she deserves like a shout out because she was like, you know, a huge part of that story, you know, because Sam, you know, was so besotted with her. And Liv, anything that stands out to yourself in terms of any facts or trivia or fun things you've come across over the years?
Again, I feel like they're things people already know. Like my favorite ones are the One Ring being modeled on Peter Jackson's wedding ring. I feel like that's the biggest compliment yet insult to his wife that you could possibly make. I love as well, everyone goes on about how Helm's Deep took 3 months to film. The fact that their Council of Elrond took 5 days to film is insane, because I know they had to take so many different angles of shots. I just think that's an undervalued fun fact there that needs to get mentioned more. And just every fact about the props. I know you mentioned the chainmail assembly, but I'm led to believe that with the construction of armor as well, for again, some nations like elves, like Gondor, they were relatively uniform. I say elves, each elf region, one would say, relatively uniform. And then you got Rohan, where like the music, incredibly ununiform, different motifs, different designs, different styles on all of the pieces of armor, because all the people from Rohan are from different areas. And I just think that a fun fact is brilliant because it just shows you how much hard work went into this. So yeah,
definitely. It's just, again, such like you can see the craft in so many things in this film. You know, there's so many things that could appear in a film museum, etc. So many weapons and all that kind of stuff. Right. Well, thank you everyone for that, and for all that knowledge there, Di, and for the facts as well. Some of your favorites there, Liv and Sherry. So we will now go to the movie vault. So talking about this film's legacy. So for anyone new to the podcast, we like to think of this as a time capsule of memorable movies for someone to dig up in the future. So should one film, the trilogy, or no films gain the honor of a place in our movie vault and be remembered for all time? Some people, I'm just going to take a straight answer. So Shelley, yes or no?
Yes.
For trilogy?
Put them all in.
Put them all in. Di,
Yeah.
what do you think? Trilogy, films, yes, no?
Yeah, go on then.
All of them.
Trilogy.
Liv,
And
what do you
not
think?
The Hobbit.
Okay, yeah, well, yes, the trilogy were first one. Liv, what do you think? Yes or no for all trilogy? One film, two films, no films?
All of them.
Cool.
But Return of the King can go in twice.
Fair. Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, you need to put all three in.
Okay. Right.
Is everyone just scared to say anything else?
No,
at this
exactly.
point?
Yeah. Well, I'll leave it to Chris and Stefanos. If you think there's more, like context you want to give for its legacy, I'll give this to you guys as you often in the movie vault section. So, Chris, what do you think?
Well, you might want to put some epic music down for this because I'm going to have to wax lyrical now. But I mean, let's be real here. These are incredible movies. I mentioned at the beginning my relationship with this film was strange because although I've always liked them, I've never really considered myself a Lord of the Rings fan. Like yourself, David, I was a sci-fi fan. I loved more things towards sci-fi and particularly horror. That was my genre. Fantasy is something I've gotten into as I've gotten older. And funnily enough, I always remember enjoying watching the Lord of the Rings movies, and rewatching them recently made me realize, my God, these are amazing films. But I also value the fact that I've not seen them that much, and that the few times that I've sat in them in their entirety and experienced them as individual films, or when you watch them as a trilogy, I realized that they're just incredible. Like, the story's wonderful, the acting is great, the filmmaking itself, I love incredible filmmaking. I love the efforts that went into, like Stefan mentioned, the Gollum, the whole concept and the whole build of that character and that persona and the performance that went around it is groundbreaking and has revolutionized industries. It's incredible. Lord of the Rings will always be looked at, in my opinion, as a piece of cinema, all three of them, that has revolutionized the industry. And like you said earlier, when that person cried, there'll never be another film like this. They're right. There may never be another film or trilogy or anything that will ever come close to what the Lord of the Rings achieved. So for a piece of cinema, for filmmaking, for the music, for the acting, for the sincerity they gave to this performance, 100% it goes in the vault. But for one more thing that needs to go in the vault for Frodo.
Yes. For the man who accidentally shot the arrow at Helm's Deep.
I 100% think too.
Yeah, and well, this is why we went to you, Chris, because even though your impassioned speech didn't manage to get brain dead in there, you have done Peter Jackson proud now by again helping these films. So Stefanos, we're on a time frame, so I know you're passionate, but as brief as you can be, please.
Yeah. So besides the personal stuff, how I feel, if I go just filmmaking wise, how you make stories and films, I think the big takeaway that I have with this trilogy is that even though fantasy is a far-fetched genre, it's very difficult to make, it is absolutely stupid and ridiculous, but what it works here is that they took it seriously. They took it as a piece of storytelling. They took it down to the characters, the core of the drama. It's not the battles, it's the relationships between those people. And they tried to go all the way in, and no half measures or anything. And they gave all they could to provide something that it is tangible, that it is approachable for a mainstream audience that is not familiar with this, but also present the best qualities of this genre, that even for myself, that I'm still not 100% into the specific genre of fantasy, I fell in love with it. And because of everything we discussed, yes, it does deserve to be in it. And yes, and it will be, say, all three films. I mean, it is three films, but I am the one who believes it's one because it is a single production. And just like with J.R.R. Tolkien, he wanted to be the whole thing to be one book. The publishers couldn't do that, so he presented them into three different parts. As that was the intention of the writer, and that was the intention of the filmmaker, I'll deem it as one.
Stefanos is like in Iron Man 3, I am the Mandarin. I am the one who said this. Okay, well, we've definitely had some very strong arguments there. I'm all on board. Craig?
Yeah, I'm on board.
So yeah, into the movie vault then goes Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Do you agree? Do you somehow disagree? Let us know. It's been a fantastic conversation. But now we wrap things up with our final part of the episode, which is today's Endgame.
We're in the Endgame now.
Okay, Endgame time. And I'd like to say that this Endgame is in loving tribute to Sean Benham. So this is a game simply called Lord of the Rings. Very simple game premise. This is just a flat-out quiz. However, it's going to be a speed quiz. To narrow it down, we're effectively going to have 2 heats, and then the winners of those 2 heats are going to take part in the final. So in each heat and the final, you'll have up to a minute to answer as many Lord of the Ring questions as you can, but obviously you're competing against each other. So we've already, via random number generator and association, determined who is going to be in which bracket. So in bracket 1, competing will be Shelley, Steph, and Liv, which means in bracket 2 will be Chris, Laura, and Di. So all of you will need some form of buzzer. So while we explain what it is that you're playing for, I want you to think of a 1-word buzzer that you can have to indicate that you want to answer your question. Okay, so what is it that we'll be playing for? Unlike usual episodes, whether that be one of our linear discussions, so you choose the next discussion, or one of our like episodes leading up to this where you get to choose something for our Endgame special, I think you guys would probably just like the honor of just knowing which of you is nerdier about Lord of the Rings, to be honest. So I think that title is prize enough on its own.
And the winner of the 100th Endgame.
Yeah, you are also the winner of the 100th Endgame. And no, Steph, this isn't just so that we have a way of getting out of giving you more prizes. All right. So, to find out everyone's buzzers, I'm just going to go across the Zoom call and I want you to tell me what your buzzer is. Chris.
Ring.
Shelley.
Isildur.
Laura.
Sam.
Steph.
Venom.
Di.
Potatoes.
Liv.
Mash 'em.
Oh.
Okay. I'll let David write that down.
Laura, what was your, sorry? Bang?
Sam.
Oh, Sam.
Yeah, I'm trying to be strategic and
I
have
thought
a
you
short
were like,
one.
bam! Like you
Yeah.
threw it on the ground.
Okay. So I will get the contestants for the first bracket. So Shelley, Steph, and Liv, are you all ready? Like I said, when you want to guess, you have to buzz in with that answer. David, can you get the clock, please? So the time will start at the end of the first question. Are we ready? Which 2 members of the Fellowship are cousins?
Isildur.
Shelley.
Frodo and Pippin.
Incorrect.
Ooh.
Aragorn has 2 other names in Lord of the Rings. What are they?
I know one of them, but what's the other?
Okay, next question then. What is Gimli's father's name?
Mash 'em.
Isildur.
That is Liv.
Gloin.
Correct. What is Sam's profession?
Mash 'em.
Isildur.
That is Liv again.
Gardener.
Correct. Where and when is Aragorn to look for Gandalf's arrival at Helm's Deep?
Venom.
Steph.
Look to the east.
I'll give you half a mark. It's to the east at dawn on the 5th day.
Oh, come on.
What king refused to throw the One Ring into Mount Doom?
Isildur!
That is Shelley.
Isildur.
Correct.
Is that the answer or your buzzer?
Who is the king of Rohan?
Masham.
Liv.
Theoden.
Correct.
Liv.
What is the name of the Uruk-hai lieutenant that kills Boromir?
Masham.
Liv.
It's alerts.
Correct. What is the name of Saruman's sidekick / assistant?
Masham.
Liv.
Oh! Wormtongue.
I'll give you that. Yep, that is correct. David, please give us the scores for bracket 1.
It was half a point to Steph, 1 point to Shelley, and 5 points to Liv.
The speed.
Yay.
Congratulations to the winner of the first heat is Liv.
I'm not an expert on anything.
Yeah, I know. I was going to think that.
Congratulations, you make it through to the final. So now we have the contestants for bracket 2. So, Chris, Laura, Di, are you ready?
Yeah.
I only come for the end game.
Cool. Again, time will start at the end of the first question. What is the name of Frodo's sword?
Potatoes.
Die.
Sting.
Correct. What bone did actor Viggo Mortensen break while filming The Two Towers?
Sam.
Laura.
His toe.
Correct. What monster does Gandalf the Grey fight in the Mines of Moria?
Potatoes.
That was Chris.
Balrog.
Correct. What is the name of Saruman's fortress?
Potato.
Die.
The Tower of Orthanc.
That's not what I've got here.
Isengard, the Vale of Isengard.
Isengard. I'll give you Isengard. You did say it.
The valley's called Isengard. The fortress
Okay,
is called
fine. You get the point. Right. How many members of the Fellowship are there?
Sam.
Laura.
9.
Correct. What is the name of Sauron's tower?
Potatoes.
Die.
It's called Barad-dûr.
Correct. And that is the minute. So, David.
So that was Chris had 1 point, Laura had 3 points, and Di had 3 points.
Ooh. So 2 people with 3 points. So in that case, we will do a tiebreaker question. Oh, so this is specifically for Laura and Di. Are you ready? No timer for this one.
Maybe.
What is Frodo's undershirt made from?
Sam.
Potatoes.
Laura.
Mithril.
And Laura is through to the final. Congratulations,
Laura's
Laura.
face was like, what's happened? How did I get you?
Can I just say, going into this episode, like, not that I usually have expectations, but if somebody had told me that this was going to be the final, I would be like, why? What happened to Di and Steph?
Yeah.
All right, fantastic.
I just got too distracted by shouting potatoes. And then every time I feel like it is the answer.
Made of potatoes.
And to be fair, it's the one time I think, like, had you not argued with me about one of the answers, you might have had more time.
Yeah.
All right. So our final then is Laura versus Liv. Who's going to end up with the ultimate L?
Surely not me.
Okay. All right. A minute on the clock. It will start again at the end of the first question. Ready? Where do the hobbits live?
Sam.
That was Laura.
The Shire.
Correct. Which kingdom answers Gondor's call for aid?
Masham.
Liv.
Rohan.
Correct. Which actor plays Gandalf?
Masham.
Liv.
Ian McKellen.
Correct. In what year was the Fellowship of the Ring originally published?
Sam.
Laura?
I didn't take a stab at it. 1942.
Incorrect. It's 1954. Which country was The Lord of the Rings filmed in?
Masham.
Liv.
New Zealand.
Correct. In what age is Lord of the Rings set?
Masham?
Liv.
Third Age?
Correct. What is the name of the giant spider that attacks Frodo?
Masham.
Liv.
Gelov.
Correct. And with that is the end. So David, please tell us the final scores.
So it was Liv with 5 points, Laura with 1 point.
So the ultimate winner of the Centenary Endgame is Liv. Congratulations.
I do not understand what just happened.
You had another guess, stab in the dark, like you did with that color one. You were like purple, and you just like one of those was correct. So well done.
The right balance of knowing things and knowing them quickly.
And I was there thinking like this was like Eurovision. I was like, oh my god, is Laura going to win the 100th episode as well as the first episode? And it's like the whole Finland Sweden thing. Like, oh well, Sweden needs to get it because it's their like anniversary or whatever. But it's like whatever. Liv got in there. So well done, Liv. You've got a good history within the Endgames. You redeemed yourself after who let the dogs out. Woof, woof, woof.
It's raining men.
Yeah.
But I do have to say, and this will probably maybe let down a few people in the room, most of those answers I didn't actually know from the films or the books. I knew from the Warhammer game based on the films. So...
Well, there was a bit of thread in the shark as well with the whole... kicking the
there's so many things that were in the quiz that were discussed in the episode, so it's just a case of does it come up because of the speed of the questions.
Well, congratulations, Liv, and thank you everyone. This has been such a fun episode, and deep diving into Lord of the Rings, a huge franchise, which again was strange that we had never come across it, so it did seem almost like fate that we needed to go through it. So thank you for being part of that discussion. Thank you for all joining us and being with us through so many episodes. We've had great memories, which we've discussed, and some great films and not so great films. Budsy the Dog movie. But today we've talked about 3 fantastic films which have all entered the movie vault. We've had a fantastic time and 100 episodes. Thank you to everyone who has joined us throughout those entire episodes, so including you guys and everyone who's been here before. Craig, anything lastly from yourself?
Show us the meaning of haste and finish this.
Thank you, everyone. Socials and stuff will be in the descriptions. If anyone wants any one-word shout-outs, Chris, any words? Final word, just a word. If sum everything up, I'm going to go through everyone. So, maybe you can use your buzzer. Maybe Shelley will be like, "Seal deal." Sum it all up. Chris, one word, sum it up.
Ring.
One word. Me and Craig will be parting ring. We'll get rid of the rings after tonight. This is a divorce. Shelley.
No, it's too difficult to say just one word to sum up these films.
Well,
so
just today,
I refuse.
Tonight's episode.
No.
That's the word. No.
No, shan't.
Laura. A phrase.
Epic.
There you go. Steph.
Precious.
Di.
King, Elisar, and Strider are 2 of the other names. Just because it's cool.
Those are the names.
And Elfstone as well. So there's 3 names really.
And Liv.
I don't know words anymore, so I'm just going to say Masham.
Okay, yeah. That one makes. That was your phrase, your catchphrase. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a fantastic episode. And yes, for everyone at home, please do catch us in our other specials. Craig is very excited. He's plotting his next Endgame special, and we'll have other sort of celebrations going on. But you can also catch us on our chain of movies, which we'll be talking about very soon, which we'll be talking about Witness, which was the film connected to History of Violence. So we'll get back to that chain soon. Thank you all again for joining us. Round of applause for everyone. Cheer. Woo! Goodbye.
Eyes of God. Eyes of God. Eyes of God.
And here we go.
Good morning and welcome to the breakfast show on BBC Radio Blast. I'm your host, Craig McDonald. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Nobility, the gentry, and how quaint, even the rabble.
It's turkey time.
Hello, chicken.
Every night it's the fucking chicken. Holy God Almighty!
You're alive. Too bad you will die.
And they're certainly not showing any signs that they are glowing.
Ew. Did you say blasphemy?
Everyone this week, a dime shake.
You're not in Kansas anymore.
I'm not gonna touch you. Not until I have your written consent.
You are a whore, darling.
No, I'm not.
What are you doing in my swamp?
It means I can't stand you being here!
For England, James?
His name is Richard Blaney. He's a right bastard.
Pair of bastards.
Yeah, Blaney was a thief, right bastard.
I kick ass for the Lord!
Of the Germinal, bitch! I am the powerful, the pleasurable, the indestructible. I am Count Dracula.
I am the picture that got small. When a man lies, he murders some part of the life.
You turned against me!
You have done that yourself. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle.
People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're cattle.
I made my family disappear. Come on now, baby Jesus. No more messing.
Oh my doggy walkie!
But there's just one thing I want to know. How's that damn 3 seashell thing work?
Well, that was just very disturbing. Go see a counselor. Ugh.
Why did you use the actual BBC Blast thing that we made?